The corridor had been painted green to make it disappear. It ran behind the boardroom and the locked catering kitchen. It was too narrow for two people to pass without turning their shoulders. The freight elevator waited at one end with its dull steel mouth shut. At the other end, behind a fire door, the Foundation's trustees spoke into glasses and plates in careful laughter. The exit sign hummed above an overturned catering crate. Veyl of the narrow green sat beneath it. It was smaller than the crate deserved, small as something kept in a reliquary and forgotten in a drawer. Its weathered skin had the color of bruised apples, left too long in shade. Nothing on it caught the fluorescent light. The light seemed to reach it and become tired. One of its eyes sat higher than the other. Not enough to make a mask of the face. Only enough to make looking at it feel like correcting an error that could not be corrected. Its narrow mouth stayed slightly damp, as if it had been tasting the words that would come later and found them familiar. It did not swing its legs. It did not turn its head toward the music muffled through the wall. It sat with its thin hands folded over its knees. The fingertips had been worn almost clear. They looked polished by centuries of reaching. The nails were blunt. The knuckles shone faintly, not with beauty, but with use. A green stain passed through the cage of its ribs. It was visible under the dull skin, like old copper rot, like a thing buried in a wall and found again years later. At its throat, there was a hollow, shallow, thumb-sized. The shape of something once fastened there and removed. Near its feet, cut flower stems lay in plastic tubs, white roses, ranunculus, tulips, branches of glossy leaves. Their severed ends stood in a little water, gone brown at the edges. The air smelled wet and green. It smelled of arrangements made beautiful for rooms where no one would ask what had been cut away. Beside the wall, silver trays had been stacked for the dessert course. The trays nearest Veyl's hands had dulled along their rims. The shine had not vanished all at once. It had thinned. It had gone gray in a patient ring, as if each tray had seen a finer tray somewhere else and accepted its own lessening. The green paint behind the crate had lost its sheen. A rectangle of wall around Veyl sat matte and chastened. Farther down, the paint still held the weak gloss of institutional enamel. Near Veyl, it looked handled, compared, reduced. From beyond the service door came the soft machinery of the gala. Ice poured into buckets. A woman laughed and stopped too quickly. A chair lay complained against polished wood. Then voices lowered again into the smooth language of governance. The boardroom was full of old money and new mission statements. It was full of women in black, men in blue, trustees with philanthropic smiles. It was full of paper packets placed square to the table edge. It was full of decisions already almost made. Veyl waited. It waited as it waited in inheritance rooms, in stairwells outside prize ceremonies, in bedrooms where one child's photographs filled the mantel and the other learned to stand very still. It had no need to lean closer. It had no need to hurry the door. The freight elevator gave a small mechanical sigh. The exit sign hummed. The trays at its side lost another measure of brightness. Veyl turned one translucent fingertip against another, gently, as though counting something too small for human sight. Then it became still again. The service door opened hard enough to strike the wall stop. Miriam Vale came through sideways, one shoulder leading. She held a grant ledger under her left arm. Her right thumb worked at a red audit tab on the exposed edge. It worried the paper in short, precise strokes. The tab had already begun to curl away from the page. She wore a black suit, cut close at the waist. The jacket did not wrinkle, though her body had. Her clipped hair had been smoothed behind both ears and then touched too often. One strand had come loose near her temple. Her mouth held itself in a line that looked practiced past usefulness. She stopped when she saw Veyl. One heel slid half an inch on the concrete. Her knees locked. The ledger shifted under her arm, and she caught it harder against her ribs. Her free hand went up to her throat, fingers spread and pressed there once. Then she lowered it, deliberately. as if someone in the room might have marked the movement against her. There was no one in the room except Veyl. Miriam looked at the crate, at the small, dull figure on it, at the higher eye, at the damp mouth. Her gaze dropped to the translucent fingertips folded over the knees, then to the green stain under the ribs. She did not scream. She drew in one breath through her nose, too sharp. It caught. Her jaw shifted as if she had bitten the inside of her cheek. The hand holding the ledger tightened again. The paper cover bent. The red tab curled farther beneath her thumb. The service door eased shut behind her. For a moment, the corridor contained only the hum of the exit sign and the noise of the gala blunted by walls. Veyl studied her. It saw the expensive suit first, the small gold studs in the ears, the shoes chosen for seriousness rather than mercy. It saw the posture trained by meetings where anger had to pass as competence. It saw the ledger clutched like a verdict, like proof, like a child held too tightly to the chest in a room full of people asking who she belonged to. It had expected heat. It had expected the flush of triumph under restraint. The private radiance of a person arriving with the instrument that would make another person fall. It had expected appetite sharpened by timing. Miriam looked only tired. The tiredness sat under her makeup. It darkened the skin beneath her eyes. It had settled in the tendons at her neck. It made her appear older than the laughter still coming from the boardroom. Older than the trustees waiting for her report. Older than the red tab she kept rubbing because it gave her hand a task. She looked at the silver trays beside Veyl. Their rims had gone ashy. Her eyes returned to its face. "You're not part of catering," she said. Her voice came out low, dry, almost steady. Veyl's mouth moved as if continuing a conversation that had begun before her name had been given to her. "No," it said gently. "I am part of this." Miriam kept her eyes on Veyl for one more second. Then she looked past it, at the freight elevator, at the locked catering kitchen, at the green-painted wall with its old scuffs near the baseboard. Anywhere but at the small thing on the crate, sitting beneath the humming exit sign, as if it had been set there by a careful hand and forgotten. "I don't have time," she said. Veyl folded its translucent fingers over its knees. "That has never prevented this kind of hour." Miriam shifted the ledger higher under her arm. The red audit tab caught against the lapel of her jacket. She smoothed it down with her thumb. The paper lifted again. "There are trustees waiting." "Yes, there is a vote. Yes. And whatever this is, I am late for it. You are in the middle of it?" The words were mild. They did not press. They simply remained there. Miriam gave a short laugh. It had no sound of laughter in it. "I'm going back in." She turned to the boardroom door and put her hand on the handle. The brass was cold. Not cool from the building's air. Cold like water taken from a deep pipe. Her palm clenched around it. She turned. The handle did not move. Miriam tried again. Harder. Her shoulder tightened. The ledger slipped half an inch, and she caught it with her elbow. Behind her, Veyl waited. "Open it," she said. "I do not hold it shut." "Then what do you do?" Veyl's damp, narrow mouth parted. "I can make them choose you." The corridor seemed to contract around the sentence. The hum of the exit sign grew more distinct. The flowers in their cut buckets gave off their green, severed smell. Somewhere in the boardroom, a glass touched wood. Miriam did not turn. Veyl continued gently. "Not as the sensible one. Not as the one who stayed. Not as the necessary interim officer who learned the machinery because no one else wished to. First, clearly, in the room where it counts, in the eyes that have been looking past you." Her hand slid from the handle. "That is ridiculous." "Yes, you can't. I can. You don't know what this is. I know enough to know the ache by its posture." Miriam turned then. Her face had tightened into its public shape. It was the look from committee minutes and condolence notes, polite, hard, nearly empty. I'm president of the foundation, she said. Interim president. A small color entered her cheeks. Acting president, pending confirmation, pending preference. The word landed softly. Miriam's free hand rose to her throat again. This time, she did not lower it at once. Veyl looked at the place her fingers covered. It looked at the ledger. It looked at the red tab, curled like a lifted lip. I require very little, it said. I'm not agreeing to anything. You must speak a comparison, aloud. No. Who was better? Who was favored? Who was made lesser? Miriam stared at it. The trays beside the wall looked grayer than before. Their rims had lost their hard silver line. Veyl's fingertips rested near them, pale at the ends, worn almost clear from centuries of reaching. You're asking me to insult my sister in a hallway. I am asking you to say the shape of the room before you re-enter it. I don't think that's different. It is different enough. Miriam stepped toward the freight elevator. The old button glowed dully under its plastic cover. She pressed it once, then again. Nothing came. The vote is in 10 minutes. Less. Then move. Veyl's one higher eye watched her without strain. The comparison first. I won't do this. You have been doing it for years. Her mouth opened, closed. From beyond the boardroom door came another wash of voices. Low, cultivated, comfortable. Someone said Celia's name, and the sound crossed the door too easily. Miriam's gaze flicked toward it. Veyl saw. It said nothing. The corridor held her there. The ledger pressed into her ribs. The red tab scratched at the inside of her arm, and her thumb found it again. She rubbed until the paper began to curl. Veyl said, Who did your mother choose? Miriam's thumb stopped. That's not a governance question. No, it has nothing to do with the ledger. It is under the ledger. Her jaw worked. She looked toward the kitchen door. A steel lock hung through its latch. Beyond it, there would be trays of covered food, boxes of wine, staff coats on hooks. Useful things, ordinary things, a place where one could have a task and avoid a room. Miriam. The way Veyl said her name was careful. It sounded placed on the floor between them. Who did she choose? Miriam inhaled through her nose. My mother valued talent. That is a policy. She believed the foundation existed to support serious art. That is a brochure. She was hard on both of us. Veyl waited. The exit sign hummed. Its red light stained the top of Veyl's small, uneven head. The green in its ribs looked darker now, like rot seen through thin fruit skin. Miriam looked down at her shoes. Celia had the gift, she said. The words were quiet. They did not echo. They entered the painted corridor and stayed close. Veyl nodded once. And you? I had judgment. Did she call it that? Miriam's face moved, a small rupture, quickly sealed. She called me reliable, the last syllable thinned. Veyl's mouth glistened. Who is better? That's childish. Yes, I'm 52 years old. Yes. I run an institution with a $30 million endowment. Yes. Don't say yes like that. Veyl inclined its head. Miriam looked at the ledger. Its cover was black cloth, expensive, practical. Celia's name was typed on the label. Rural Arts Renewal Initiative. Final grant compliance materials. Miriam had placed the red tab herself. She had done it in her office, with the door closed. The discrepancy was real. The timing was hers. Celia was better, she said. Her lips barely moved. At what? At being loved for what she did badly. Veyl's higher eye seemed to sharpen. Miriam swallowed. No, that isn't fair. What is fair? She took risks. Mother respected that. And you? I made sure risks had budgets. The attempt at bitterness failed halfway through. It came out as fatigue. Veyl's fingers shifted over its knees. Where the fingertips touched each other, they looked almost absent. What did you call the hidden envelope? Miriam's head lifted. What? The documents you set aside. The audit note. The donor restriction letter. The copy you marked before the trustees saw the final packet. Miriam became very still. For the first time, fear appeared without disguise. You've been in my office. I have been in many pauses after praise. She said nothing. What did you call it? I didn't call it anything. Veyl waited. Miriam's breath grew shallow. She looked at the door. It remained closed. On the other side, the board would be turning pages. The chair would be making one of his careful jokes about procedure. Celia would be smiling as if procedure were a weather system that would pass around her. Fairness, Miriam said. Veyl did not move. That's what it was, fairness. The ledger was incomplete. The transfer from the equipment fund was improperly coded. She missed it because she always misses the dull things. And everyone forgives her because there are children in barns painting murals and old women binding quilts in church basements. And trustees love photographs of sincerity. The sentence had gathered speed. She stopped it herself. Her thumb found the red tab again. I was protecting the foundation. Veyl watched the paper bend. From what? Mismanagement. From whom? From embarrassment. Whose? Miriam's eyes shone now. She blinked once, hard. Ours. Veyl said nothing. The silence was worse than contradiction. Miriam. She shook her head. No. What did you call it? I told you. What did you call it when no one could hear you? Her mouth trembled before she brought it under control. Protection. For whom? For the institution. Veyl's gaze did not leave her. For whom? Miriam made a sound. It was small and angry. It might have been a laugh if there had been any air in it. For myself. The corridor seemed to listen. Veyl lowered its chin. And beneath protection? Miriam pressed the ledger against her body with both arms. The red tab scraped her wrist. You want me to say ugly things because that's your entertainment? No. You want confession? No. Then what? Accuracy. The word was almost tender. Miriam looked at the small thing on the crate, at the hollow around its throat. A shallow place, shaped like something once worn there, and removed. She looked away. Punishment, she said. Veyl received it without pleasure. Whose? Celia's. For what? For being careless. Veyl waited. For making me carry everything. It waited. For coming back when Mother died, and letting everyone act as if her absence had been a form of purity. Her voice altered. It lowered. It lost its boardroom surface. She left. She went to residencies. She sent postcards from places where the light was different. Mother kept them on the mantle. Do you know that? Of course you know. Everyone knew. The postcards stayed there through winter, through donor dinners, through my budget meetings at the dining table, because she said the office depressed her after chemo. Celia wrote 3 sentences about a sculpture park in Norway, and Mother touched the card like it had a pulse. Miriam stopped. The rule of the scene returned around her. No dining room, no mantel, only the corridor, the hum, the cut stems, the locked kitchen. Veyl did not follow her backward. It kept her there. And the truer reason, it asked. Miriam shut her eyes. No, the truer reason beneath punishment. You already have enough. No, I said it. You arranged the moment. You kept the envelope until the vote. You marked the tab in red. You walked out with the ledger so you could return with it, as necessity. What did you want? Miriam opened her eyes. They were wet now. The tears did not fall. She looked more formal because of them, as if grief had dressed her. I wanted her stopped. That is still a hallway word. Her lips parted. For several seconds, she could not speak. Then she said, "I wanted her small enough to need me." The statement took something from her posture. Her shoulders lowered, not in relief, in loss. Veyl looked down at its own thin hands. The green stain in its ribs seemed to pulse once with the emergency light, or perhaps the sign had flickered. "Name the person." Miriam gave a brittle sound. "Don't be absurd." "Name her. You know her name." "Yes." "She is my sister." "Yes." "She is also an applicant before the board." "Yes." "She is not some enemy." Veyl lifted its uneven face. "Name the person you most resent." Miriam stared at the black ledger until the letters blurred. "Celia." The name came out plainly. It did not break. That made it worse. "What do you wish taken from Celia?" Miriam shook her head. "No. What do you wish taken?" "The grant." "And?" "Her eligibility." "And?" Miriam pressed her mouth shut. Veyl waited. The boardroom laughter had stopped. Papers moved behind the wall. A chair leg shifted. "Miriam," Veyl said. She looked at it with a kind of exhausted hatred. "The presidency," she said. "From her, she doesn't even want it properly. What else?" Miriam's breath hitched. "My mother's pride." The corridor held the words like damp wool. Veyl's fingertips flexed. The trays near it dulled further at their edges. "What else?" "There is nothing else." "What else?" Miriam's face crumpled once. She restored it with both hands, wiping beneath her eyes with the heels of her palms. It left faint tracks in her makeup. She looked suddenly young, then not young at all. "Her name," she said. Veyl tilted its head. "Say it exactly." Miriam drew in a breath that hurt. Her bright, unspoiled name. The phrase seemed to shame her as soon as it left her. She looked toward the door. She looked at the ledger. She looked at her own hands, at the clean nails, the pale half-moons, the red line where the tab had scratched her skin. "I wanted them to look at her," she said, "and see what I see. What do you see?" Miriam's answer came without defense now. "That she has been fed all her life by what I starved on." Veyl's mouth stayed slightly open, as if it had been tasting the sentence before she spoke it and found it exact. "And what did you want?" Miriam did not move. The answer took longer than the others. "I wanted to be chosen." "Over whom?" "Over Celia." "By whom?" Her throat worked. "My mother." The hum of the exit sign filled the gap after it. Veyl did not tell her the dead made no votes. It did not tell her the living borrowed old rooms and called them institutions. It only sat there, small and ancient and patient, with its polished fingers folded. Miriam looked at the boardroom door. "And now?" Veyl asked it softly. Miriam held the ledger harder. "Now I want them to do it for her." "For your mother? For everyone? What part of you has been feeding on the absence?" The question entered so quietly that Miriam almost missed it. Then she understood. She closed her eyes again. This time, the tears fell. "My usefulness," she said. Veyl waited. "My correctness." It waited. "The part that believes if she is diminished, I become visible." The corridor did not change. Nothing opened. Nothing forgave her. Veyl's throat hollow seemed deeper in the red wash of the sign. It said, "Now you have spoken the comparison." A click sounded behind Miriam, small, mechanical, final. The boardroom handle had released. From inside came the chair's voice, softened by wood and insulation. "If everyone has the final materials, we can proceed." Miriam turned toward the door. Her face went blank again, but the blankness no longer fit. It sat crookedly over what had been said. The ledger remained under her arm. Celia's name faced out. The red audit tab hung loose now, torn halfway from its adhesive. Miriam's thumb had worried the corner. until it curled away like dead skin. Veyl stayed on the crate. It did not rise. It did not remind her of the offer. It had already placed it in the corridor between them. Miriam could feel it there. If she walked in and opened the ledger to the marked page, the sequence would be simple. She would speak in the language the board trusted. Material irregularity. Restricted funds, non-compliance pending investigation. Temporary suspension of disbursement. The rural program would stop at once. The maps would come off the table. The photographs of school gymnasiums and cattle barns and borrowed church halls would become regrettable supporting material. Celia would sit still while trustees avoided looking directly at her. The chair would thank Miriam for her diligence. Someone would say, difficult but necessary. Someone else would say, stewardship. By morning, Miriam would be indispensable. By next month, permanent. Not loved, not healed, not returned to any room where her mother waited with her hand extended, but chosen, clearly enough to survive on for a while. Veyl's mouth moved. I can make it unmistakable. Miriam did not look back. How? The eyes will go where you have wanted them. The vote will harden. Their gratitude will have weight. They will prefer you while she hears it. Miriam's fingers tightened. The boardroom murmured. A page turned. Celia said something indistinct, and a trustee answered warmly. Miriam shut her eyes. And after? She asked. Veyl's reply came gently. After, you will have been preferred. That isn't what I asked. No. What do I have after that? The small thing was silent long enough that the hum took over again. Then it said, more appetite. Miriam opened her eyes. The answer did not surprise her. That was its cruelty, or its courtesy. She looked down at the ledger. If she did not open it, the discrepancy would remain what it had also always been. A real issue. A dull issue. A correctable issue. Routine reconciliation. Staff review. Revised coding. A note to finance. Celia would remain eligible. The board might choose Celia's program in front of her. They might praise its reach. Its feeling. Its radiance. They might turn to Miriam and thank her for steady interim service, for preserving order, for guiding transition. The word transition would be clean and merciless. Celia might be chosen again. Not because Miriam had failed to work. Not because the ledger was spotless. Not because the old comparison was false enough to vanish when named. Because naming it did not remove it. There was no neutral ground. Fraud would be an act. Routine reconciliation would be an act. Silence would be an act with polished shoes. Procedure would not save her from authorship. Even delay would choose a side, because the vote was now, and the ledger was in her hands. Miriam's breathing changed. Veyl watched her with its inventory calm. You can still have it, it said. She turned then. The small demon sat under the exit sign, dull and worn, its uneven eyes fixed on her, as if she were both ancient and newly made. The wall around it had lost the shine of its green paint. The trays beside it looked rubbed with ash. A damp word seemed to rest in its narrow mouth. Miriam thought of opening the ledger. She thought of Celia's face, going carefully still. She thought of the trustees adjusting their papers, of the chair's regret, of the presidency arriving at last, dressed as necessity. Her hand moved to the red tab. It came away between her fingers, a small strip of paper, red, softened by sweat. She looked at it as if it were evidence from someone else's life. Then she let it fall. It landed near Veyl's crate without sound. Inside the boardroom, the chair said, Miriam. Veyl did not speak. Miriam stood with the ledger under her arm and the open door at her back. For one suspended moment, she remained in the narrow green corridor. Then she moved. Miriam crossed the service corridor slowly. The ledger had grown heavy under her arm. Its red audit tab hung by one torn corner. It brushed her sleeve with each step, soft as a tongue. Behind her, Veyl made no sound, The boardroom door gave at once when she touched it. Light opened around her. Warm glass, white flowers. The long walnut table, with its microphones, set at even intervals. Trustees turned in their chairs with the mild impatience of people who had been waiting only a little while and wished to be seen as patient. Celia stood near the windows. She had one hand on the back of a chair and the other around a water glass. Two trustees leaned toward her. She was laughing softly, not loudly, not to claim the room. It had always been worse than that. On the table in front of Celia, the rural program maps lay spread in color. River towns, school gyms, church basements, old feeders marked with blue pens. They looked, from the door, like bright fields seen from a great height. Miriam stepped inside. The chair looked up from his packet. His silver reading glasses sat low on his nose. "There you are," he said. "We were about to proceed." "Yes," Miriam said. Her voice sounded ordinary. It disappointed her. She went to her place. No one reached for the ledger. No one had to. They all knew what it was, the final governance report. The late discrepancy. The thing that had made several trustees stop using Celia's name directly and begin saying due diligence. Miriam laid the ledger on the table. She placed it squarely before her. The cover faced up. The audit tab showed along the side, bent and red and half torn away. She did not open it. A small quiet moved around the table. Celia's laugh had stopped. She looked at the ledger first, then at Miriam. Miriam kept her hand on the cover for one breath too long. She felt the board waiting. She felt the shape Veyl had made inside her, a hollow with polished sides, a place worn smooth by reaching. The chair cleared his throat. "Miss Veyl," he said, "before the vote, we need your final governance recommendation regarding the accounting matter in Miss Arlen's grant file." Celia did not sit down. Miriam drew the microphone closer. It made a brief scrape against the wood. Too loud, several people lowered their eyes to their papers. She had written the other sentence already. It lay in her folder. Material irregularity. Pending investigation. Suspension of eligibility. She knew the weight of each word. She knew where to put the pause. She looked once at Celia. Celia's face had not become small. It had not become frightened enough to satisfy anything. There was concern there, and anger held back with care, and a tenderness Miriam could not bear to name, because it had survived too much mismanagement. Miriam lifted her hand from the ledger. "The irregularity requires reconciliation," she said. "Routine reconciliation." The chair's pen stopped. Miriam heard someone shift at the far end of the table. "It does not, in my judgment, require suspension of the rural arts grant," she said. Celia blinked. Only once. Miriam opened the folder beside the ledger, not the ledger itself. Her prepared report waited there. She turned it over. The clean side of the paper faced up. "There is no finding of fraud before the board tonight," Miriam said. The words left her, one by one. They did not release her. They only became facts in the room. The chair sat back. "That is your recommendation?" "Yes. And you are comfortable proceeding to the presidential vote with that on record?" Miriam's thumb moved toward the red tab. She stopped it. She folded both hands in her lap until the urge passed. "Yes," she said. A trustee near Celia whispered something. Celia did not answer. The chair looked at Miriam for a long moment, then at the unopened ledger, then down at his agenda. Very well. The room resumed itself. Papers lifted, glasses touched coasters. Someone asked whether the reconciliation timeline should be entered into the minutes. Miriam answered, 30 days. Independent review. No suspension. Each sentence cost less than she had feared, and more than she could show. When the chair asked whether she wished to add anything regarding her own candidacy, Miriam looked at the microphone. It waited on its small black stem. She could still say something polished. She could remind them of her years in administration, her steadiness, her mother's trust in her judgment, She could make the room see the necessary daughter, the daughter who had stayed late, the daughter who knew where every document was kept. Celia stood by the windows, still holding the water glass. Miriam looked at her. "No," she said. The chair nodded. He made a mark on the page. "Then we will proceed." Miriam placed both hands flat on the table, beside the microphone, her palms pressed against the polished wood. The ledger remained closed between her and Celia. Its red tab curled outward like a little wound that had not finished opening. In the corridor, Veyl climbed down from the crate. It did not jump. It lowered one narrow foot to the concrete, and then the other, careful as an old clerk leading a high stool. The exit sign hummed above it. The green wall around the sign had gone dull in a soft square, as though the paint had forgotten how to answer. Light. The service corridor was empty again. From the boardroom came the muffled scrape of chairs. A cough. The chair's voice, made flat by the door. Names were being read. Votes were being counted into a record that would outlive the flowers. Veyl crossed to the place where Miriam had stood. A strip of red paper lay near the wall, the torn audit tab. It had come away from the ledger and fallen without sound. One end had curled from the damp in the air. Cut stems were stacked in a plastic tub beside it, their pale, severed ends crowded together and leaking green scent. Veyl crouched. Its translucent fingertips hovered over the strip before touching it. The red did not brighten beneath its hand. It dulled at the edges. The color seemed to retreat into the paper, ashamed of having called attention to itself. Veyl lifted the strip. It held it against the hollow at its throat, where something had once been kept, and removed. Then it brought the paper to its narrow mouth. It did not eat it. It tasted the place Miriam's thumb had worried the tab until the fibers gave. It tasted fairness, protection, punishment. It tasted Celia's name after it had been spoken, without its costume. It tasted what Miriam had wanted taken, and what she had not taken when the handle opened. The demon stood very still. This was not satisfaction. It had known satisfaction in the way a locked room knew music through a wall. Close enough to tremble, never enough to enter. It folded the red strip once and placed it under its tongue. In the boardroom, ballots moved down the table in a cream-colored stack. A trustee passed them with both hands, as if they were invitations. Celia had taken her seat. She looked at Miriam once, across the unopened ledger, but Miriam was looking down. The chair called the first name. Miriam did not answer yet. Her hands were still flat beside the microphone. The knuckles had whitened. Under the table, one heel lifted from the floor and lowered again without sound. The chair turned a page. Outside, in the narrow green corridor, Veyl returned to the overturned crate beneath the humming sign. It sat with its hands folded over its knees. The silver trays nearby kept their gray rubbed edges. The cut stems gave off their clean, dying smell. Then the chair called Miriam's name.